A certain heretofore to be named New York Times Nobel Prize winning economist thinks that Keynes was right. He has the evidence to prove it. Could rampant government shrinkage possibly threaten our future prosperity? I'm Alan Barton. Stand by for the front page. Joining me in studio, Tim Cavanaugh, managing editor of Reason.com, and Terry Jones, associate editor for Investors Business Daily. Paul Krugman, come on, was there any doubt? It's Paul Krugman. He continues his narrative for the new year. Quote, "We entered 2011 amid dire warnings about a Greek-style debt crisis that would happen as soon as the Federal Reserve stopped buying bonds, or the rating agencies ended our AAA status, or the Super Committee failed to reach a deal, or something. But the Fed ended its bond purchase program in June. Standard & Poor's downgraded America in August. The Super Committee deadlocked in November. U.S. borrowing costs just kept falling. In fact, at this point, inflation-protected U.S. bonds pay negative interest. Investors are willing to pay America to hold their money. The bottom line is that 2011 was a year in which our political elite obsessed over short-term deficits that aren't actually a problem, and in the process made the real problem, a depressed economy and mass unemployment, worse." All right, Terry. So does he have a point in the sense that everyone was predicting that these actions by the Fed were going to lead to massive inflation, and we're not seeing it, and the bond, foreign investors are coming in because we're still the safest place to hold our money? Is that accidental? Is there accidental? Is there a point to be made there?
You can concede the one point that Armageddon did not hit America, financial Armageddon did not hit America last year. But that's not to say it won't happen this year. That's and his point about debt is utterly nonsensical. I mean, we've tranched out $1.5 trillion in debt. Who does he think's buying all this debt? And who does he think will buy it this year? The Fed is already planning for a QE3, quantitative easing, in the event that the economy slows. So they will be the purchaser of last resort for U.S. bonds. If he doesn't believe that, just wait and see.
Yeah, there were two essays, and this first one was about Keynes, and it was called Keynes is Right. And Keynes it's a really awesome economic theory because you have to spend a bazillion dollars, and if you spend anything short of a bazillion, it won't work at all, and you're a fool for not believing. Is there anything that you can do to counteract that? Because it's sort of part of the whole overall philosophy. It would have been worse. It could have been worse. Yeah. If you didn't do this, you should have spent more, or it would have been worse. There's never anything you can grab onto. Tim, anything?
Yeah, it is. It's the gift that just keeps on giving. And it's interestingly in that article. You always have to look for the to be sures in the Krugman article. I mean, there's to be sure. We should be worried about this deficit.
Yeah, at the end of the article, he was like, "Greece, sure, does face a very perilous problem."
And it's also true that when everybody is seeking safety around the world, they put their money into U.S. Treasuries because the U.S. government does have a habit of continuing to make payments. We can debate whether it makes payments in the same in currency that is the same value as the original debt was taken out on, but that part is true. But he will never come down. Krugman won't to what is a dollar figure? Is it going to be? Let's say we look at the Fed's flow of funds reports and see what household net worth is. Can we say it's like about $5 trillion? That's what we're off, and that's what we should be spending. He posits himself now as standing against conventional wisdom because conventional wisdom is all about deficit slashing. I think it would be more accurate to say he's against common sense. I mean, everybody around the country has realized I'm in too much debt, my family's in too much debt, my city's in too much debt, so is my county, my state, and my federal government, and we have to start getting things under control. That's why you're seeing, after decades of creeping downward, you're seeing the equity portion of what we hold in real estate, just average Americans hold in real estate, is going up just a tiny bit. People are trying to retire their massive debt, and they don't see the government trying to do that. And whether Krugman likes it or not, that's the way people behave. I mean, he's very frustrated because they don't continue to follow the incentives that he thinks they should be following.
Yeah. Well, let's look at what he said about debt, because that was his second essay after he got through validating all of Keynes. He says about debt, deficit warriors portray a future in which we're impoverished by the need to pay back the money we've been borrowing. They see America as being like a family, that took out too large a mortgage and will have a hard time making the monthly payments. This is, however, a really bad analogy in at least two ways. First, families have to pay back their debt. Governments don't. All they need to do is ensure that the debt grows more slowly than their tax base. The debt from World War II was never repaid. It just became increasingly irrelevant as the U.S. economy grew, and with it, the income subject to taxation. Second, and this is the point almost nobody seems to get, except Mr. Krugman, an over-borrowed family owes money to somebody else. The U.S. debt, largely, to a large extent, is money we owe ourselves. Terry, what about these 2 points? The idea that you can outgrow debt if the tax base is, debt should be measured against tax base.
You can. But how are they doing on that score? Not very well at all. In fact, debt is exploding and the economy is just very crawling along. So yes, debt in and of itself is not a horrible thing. I mean, all people have debt, of some sort. If you buy a house, you have debt. But if your income is growing faster than the debt, that's not a big issue. The problem is Keynesian economics produces slow growth, and it produces basically a recipe for curing it of adding more debt, and that debt becomes a burden. It takes dollars out of the private economy and gives them to the misallocators in the public.
Keynes hasn't been applied correctly, Terry. It hasn't been applied correctly. You have to spend another bajillion dollars to get it to work. You have to hit that minimum of a bajillion.
There's one other thing here, and that is he says, well, we owe it to ourselves. We don't owe it to someone. That's baloney. We owe it to individual investors, be they American or the Chinese, who own close to, by some estimates, close to $2 trillion in U.S. treasuries. If he doesn't think that's somebody, I got news for him. The English own a huge amount of U.S. debt. So we owe it to somebody, and we have to pay it off.
Tim, anything on either of these two analogies? The idea that the homeowner analogy is not
having
parallel, and
having had all of the misfortunes that the average American was subject to over the past couple of years, I can tell you, it makes a big difference how much income you have. I mean, the first part of his analogy, that it's not like a family because we just have to keep growing our tax base. Yeah, I have to keep bringing in more money to keep paying my debts. It doesn't make any. That's not a conceptual difference. And the second thing, that we owe the money to ourselves. Try telling that to all the people out there holding U.S. treasuries. Hey, it's your patriotic duty not to worry about this debt that your government owes you anymore. Right. It's absurd. I mean, the money has to be paid back. It has to be paid back in full. It always has been paid back in full, to some extent. So, it's not just. It isn't just conceptual, and our tax base isn't growing. That's why you're seeing them seize more areas. You're seeing them trying to tax more overseas income. You're trying to see them tax more charitable giving. You're trying to take more control of how you donate your car to your local public radio station or whatever. I mean, these guys are not just sitting there saying, the taxes are coming in fine.
Yeah. Tim, I want to follow up with you about an article in Reason.com. Matt Welch writes about Tom Friedman's prescriptions for the U.S. and Friedman's desire to be more like China, which we've talked about on this show. Tell us a little bit about the article and what Matt is talking about here, because there is this sort of recent romanticizing of the Chinese economy and these wonderful Chinese. If we could just have their airports. Their airports are just so amazing.
If only we could have an economy like theirs where everybody's almost as rich as they are in Mexico. It's absurd. It's the result of the Thomas Friedman way of going about the world, which is to go and talk to your cab driver on your way to meet the Prime Minister, on your way to meet the Minister of Commerce, and then from there to have lunch with the Minister of Information. And it is creepy. It is. I would not put Krugman in this line, but I would put Friedman in a category of somebody who constantly speaks in terms of bully worship and force and all of his great metaphors. The invisible hand only works if there's an invisible fist. If we break Iraq, we own Iraq. And now this thing, if we were only like China, where the leaders could just decide in their wisdom what's best for us, and we didn't have to worry about this
property rights,
democracy. Yeah.
We could just move 10,000 people and build an airport if we need to. I mean, it would be so much easier, Terry, if we could just be like China. Any thoughts on the on the article here? Because it's really oftentimes very, very funny about quoting the people who have gone after Friedman. You know, there are 5 things wrong with the world, and in implementing those 5 things, there are 4 obstacles. Implemented by 3 people who formed 4 obstacles to the 5 solutions. You know, and he talks about the oversimplification of.
You know, about every decade and a half, 2 decades, the left finds a new authoritarian, top-down model to envy and worship. In the 50s, believe it or not, the left thought the Soviets had the answer. Then it was Europe's third way. Then it was Japan, and now it's China. Well, none of these countries have it right. They're all top-down deciders. They misallocate capital on a massive scale, and they've all ended up suffering for it.
Well, and they're saying that I mean, there's a lot of people out there that say that China is due for a reckoning in terms of, you want to talk about an asset bubble.
China's reckoning is here. They're already experiencing declines in manufacturing output. Real estate prices are plunging. They're in serious trouble, and I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't have a breakdown.
Absolutely. I'm not going to predict the future of China. I hope they do well. I think every country I want to see doing as well as possible, but we are seeing the phenomenon of ghost malls, of giant developments in China, ghost cities that have been built up, and there is no demand for them. Nobody can afford them. And you know, and why should we be looking to them for our model anyway? I mean, we have a model that has worked for us, and the model is leave people free to make their own decisions, and they'll surprise you with their ingenuity.
What a concept! What a nutcase!
Wow, that's crazy. Talk about oversimplifying. Jeez, Tim. All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. To see more of Tim Kavanaugh, visit reason.com, and you can find more of Terry Jones at ibdeditorials.com. For Tim and Terry, I'm Alan Barton. You've been watching Front Page.